So, is it possible for somebody to suffer from anxiety and not know it?
Yeah. And I think that's such a good question because, like, anxiety is both an emotion and it's now also a diagnosis condition.
Yeah.
Like, so what I like to say is more I'm feeling anxious in the moment is different than I have anxiety.
Because you said anxiety is an emotion, and emotions are fleeting. So, like,
Correct.
so when you're saying I'm anxious, that's the present. Right now,
Exactly.
I'm
Like
anxious.
right now I am anxious, right?
But
Like
if you say I have anxiety,
now it's a
that's a
diagnosis.
diagnosis.
Right. Like it's like saying I have happiness,
Good example. Yeah.
right? I have anger. Burst into tears. And my husband was like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Look, I can't take this anymore because this has been going on for a while. This has been going on for 4 years." And it's like, I just really want to quit, but I don't think we have the money for me to do that. And he said, "You know what? Your mental health is more important than the money. Just quit." So that's when I quit. And so then I started building my coaching business, but I ran into stuff with that too because it was there's just I couldn't change my thinking to change my emotions in certain circumstances. Because that's kind of what mindset coaching says. Well, if you change your thoughts, you'll change your feelings. And that's when I discovered that there's something missing with mindset coaching. It doesn't take into account the fact that the body is more in charge than the mind. And that it, in my case, it's that I had a lot of trauma that wasn't diagnosed, and then that's when I got diagnosed with complex trauma. If you've ever heard of Bessel van der Kolk, he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is a great book to get at a lot of what trauma is. And that was it. It's like when the body's keeping the score and you're trying to change your emotion with your brain, that's like putting lipstick on a pig. You can't do it. You have to regulate here and deal with the trauma, deal with the cortisol there, create safety before your brain can turn back on and make a logical decision. So a lot of the things is we have it backwards in our society when people want to believe that mindset is everything. What a lot of the time they're basically suppressing those emotions that need to come out.
Dr. Susie Castellanos, Hansley, how are you?
I'm great, John. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How have you been since the last time we spoke? I think it was at NSA, the National Speakers Association.
Yeah, you came to our second Saturday event. I think it was in September. It was so fun to have you there.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And while we're on the topic, please care to share about NSA to our viewers.
Sure.
I believe that you're on a part of the leadership team.
I'm not on the board, but I do some things. So I am a member of the National Speakers Association. So not the other NSA, because there's another NSA. It's like national, some kind of surveillance thing that the government. No. Yeah. So we're speakers. We're not surveilling. And so the National Speaker Association is a national organization, and there are also chapters throughout the country. And I am a proud member of the Carolinas chapter. And so what we do is we are an association for professional speakers who want to build and develop their speaking and their business and their impact.
Awesome. And yes, I've attended two. I think I've attended two. Definitely one.
You definitely attended one in Raleigh. Did you attend one in Charlotte or Winston-Salem yet?
No, maybe only one then.
Okay.
Maybe only one. But yeah, I had a great time. It seems like, 30, 40 people?
It's growing. I think when you came, it was about 20. And we are now expanding into a bigger space in that same building at Frontier RTP.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But other than that, how have you been since, like last time we spoke?
I've been good, just... before we started recording a little bit, we were chatting a little bit about ADHD, but a lot of it has been like learning more about myself you know, learning more about myself and my body. My husband and I like to talk about the fact that our identity is not really in how we feel or how we act or whatever. We tend to think of ourselves based on our bodies, but thanks to menopause and and an ADHD diagnosis, I now know that we're basically hormone-driven meat sacks, is what I like to say. That's what my husband says too. He says it too because he got diagnosed with prostate cancer a number of years ago, and when he had to end the testosterone, oh my God, he went through menopause. Before he had the prostate cancer and the drugs to cut off his testosterone, I'd seen him cry once in our marriage. At that point, a marriage of like 15 years.
Wow.
And after that, and it was awesome because he got to understand what it feels like to feel all these emotions.
So what do you think stops us or conflicts with us from tapping into ourselves? Do you think it's like the busy everyday, working 9 to 5s, always something to do?
Well, I think it's because we are taught by society that emotions are a sign of weakness, and so we numb ourselves from what the body is feeling, and we try to live in our heads. That is what, and that's kind of a Western civilization thing that we've always had, that if you go way back, to Aristotle, he talks about, the mind is rational, the body is emotional, and so you're supposed to use your rational mind to control your emotional body, right? And so that's one of the ways in which, men get identified as rational and they shouldn't have emotions, and then women are seen as irrational because they're more emotional. Now, thanks to the recent science, we now know why that is, that when men end up having testosterone, that dampens the emotionality. Like, think of my husband. As soon as the testosterone, tapped out, he got emotional. And, and for women, we have more emotions because of the estrogen. So if you were to give different hormones to different people, they would feel differently. They would act differently. I think, though, that we are still so tied into this belief that emotions are shameful, tears are shameful, and we pick that up at such a young age, that it happens before language. But when we start to learn that our caretakers, for example, if we are crying or we're feeling a lot of emotion, they may get frustrated and try to suppress it. And we don't blame our parents, really. I mean, everybody's stressed out, but it's kind of an intergenerational trauma that happens that I feel we don't talk enough about. That we are all recipients of this trauma of being told that emotions are a weakness. And it became even more prevalent, honestly, because it's not universal, but it really became far more prevalent historically in the late 19th century when we got really industrialized. Because then you really had to learn to suppress your emotions to be a producer, to be laboring all the time. But that's my answer to that, is that we, this is kind of the programming. We've been programmed to shame emotion and suppress it, and it causes a lot of problems for people.
I definitely agree. Well, Dr. Susie, I'm so excited for today's interview. But before we officially get started, please, just as a reminder to me, and especially for our audience, please introduce yourself. Who is Dr. Susie? And talk about all that transpired leading up to you being a dynamic speaker and workshop facilitator.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you one thing. Go ahead and call me Susie. You don't have to call me Dr. Susie.
Okay, I just wanted to be respectful.
I appreciate it. Most people do want to call me Dr. Susie, and I find it so lovely, but I'm Susie today.
Susie today.
Yes.
Yes. Well, please introduce yourself, Susie.
Yeah, no worries. So yes, I'm Susie, and I am a speaker. I am also a coach. And what I do is I use the science of stress and biology to help people stress less, not burn out, and so they can actually be more productive and happy in their lives. And how I got to that is it happened really when I was working in my last corporate job. I was having a really hard time because I didn't have the greatest manager. It was sort of a bit of what we call a toxic situation, in the sense that I wasn't being I wasn't growing. That is one of the key things, that you need to grow your people. And whenever I would ask to learn more, to have more independent responsibilities, things that were part of my job description but I wasn't taught to do, there was always a reason not to. And there was also a bit of gaslighting that would happen, where the manager would look a certain way in front of other people, but then would throw me under the table, or and it turned out after I quit that it wasn't just me, that it was something this person does to others. But it was really toxic, and I found myself one day frustratedly crying at work, like that. It's like, why doesn't she trust me? What's wrong with me? Why does she say one thing but does another? And what got me started in my direction is that I learned about coaching. So I started participating in a program called the Life Coach School as a client of theirs getting coached. So it was like a big group coaching thing. And I found it super helpful because it gave me a better sense of how I could shift my thoughts around this and then not make it quite so personal. But there was a limit to that. I decided I wanted to be a coach, but there was a limit to how much your mindset can shift in the face of challenges like my manager. And I knew I wanted to quit and have my own coaching business, but I wanted to stay working until I had made enough money. And what happened is there was a straw that broke the camel's back moment at work, where we were in COVID, so we were all working from home, and we were in a conversation with like the department, and I had been asking for something important to retain a client for over 6 weeks, and the client wanted it. The person, my manager didn't trust me to do it. She was going to do it. And every meeting I would be like, okay, they asked for this. They're still asking for this. I need this thing, And in that meeting, my manager said, well, I sent it to you a month ago. And I was just like, what? Because she hadn't. And I already knew her history, that she would lie about things, through other peers, where she would say, oh, I sent this thing to that client, and then she hadn't. Things like that, internally. And I said, well, then why don't you go find it and send it to me again? I'd love to see the forward. But when I got off that call, I just burst into tears. And my husband was like, what's wrong? And I said, look, I can't take this anymore. Because this has been going on for a while. This has been going on for 4 years. And it's like, I just really want to quit, but I don't think we have the money for me to do that. And he said, you know what? Your mental health is more important than the money. Just quit. So that's when I quit. And so then I started building my coaching business. But I ran into stuff with that too, because it was, I couldn't change my thinking to change my emotions in certain circumstances, because that's kind of what mindset coaching says. Well, if you change your thoughts, you'll change your feelings. And that's when I discovered that there's something missing with mindset coaching. It doesn't take into account the fact that the body is more in charge than the mind. And that in my case, it's that I had a lot of trauma that wasn't diagnosed, and then that's when I got diagnosed with complex trauma. If you've ever heard of Bessel van der Kolk, he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is a great book to get at a lot of what trauma is. And That was it. It's like when the body's keeping the score and you're trying to change your emotion with your brain, that's like putting lipstick on a pig. You can't do it. You have to regulate here and deal with the trauma, deal with the cortisol there, create safety before your brain can turn back on and make a logical decision. So a lot of the things is we have it backwards in our society when people want to believe that mindset is everything. What a lot of the time they're basically suppressing those emotions that need to come out.
So how did you deal, or how are you still dealing with the trauma?
I had a therapist for 18 months. She was fantastic. She's in the UK. And, you know, she didn't take insurance, obviously. But I met her through an app called Clubhouse. At the time, everybody was on that because we couldn't connect in real life. And everything she said made sense to me. And so I worked with her, and she does something called Human Givens, which is a British psychology school or way of doing it. You know how like there's CBT, you know, DBT, you know, there's Freudian or whatever. So Human Givens is a type, right? And it really worked for me because in the US right now, everybody does something called EMDR, which is I can't remember what it stands for, but it has to do with moving your eyes, and then somehow that unlocks things. Well, the studies show that that's not great for complex trauma. It's really great if you have shock trauma, which is like a specific event, like there was a car crash and now I never want to get into the car. But when you grow up with all these traumas that happen over and over and over and they build up, that's what complex trauma is, complex PTSD. That doesn't really work because it's not like you have a memory of those things. And so what she did worked so much better and so much faster for me. And then I also learned about different modalities. Like I mentioned, tapping. That's something that's really great to kind of like move the trapped cortisol out of your body. There's also... I'm blanking out right now because I have aphasia thanks to thanks to the lack of estrogen. But there's things that are more body modalities specifically, and I also use hypnotherapy. I have found that to be a really good adjunct. Like once you've done like the trauma therapy, I'm finding the hypnotherapy super useful. Because it really is in a way working the inner child a little bit more. Now there are some really other good modalities, like I know internal family systems is pretty good because it's like looking at the different accumulated voices that we end up inheriting, and there's different parts. But I still think Human Givens is better because it's interesting. I still feel like a lot of American psychology and stuff still sees it as a disorder. And, you know, you have to see things as a disorder, as a medical disorder in order to get paid, you know, the DSM, like you have to have a diagnosis, you know, diagnostic manual. And what I liked about Human Givens and my therapist is like, I'm not seen as having a disorder. I'm seen as having like, oh, this thing interrupted this thing and then we just release it. And to me, that was far more empowering and it was far more holistic.
So you think titles, negative titles, can deter somebody from seeking help?
I do, but it also like it just feels more shaming. And you know, I mentioned the ADHD diagnosis earlier that I got diagnosed last year. But if you look at that label, it's attention hyperactivity, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You know, it's a disorder. And what's interesting about it is that, you know, that name came from observing people who appeared to be hyperactive, and they said, well, they're being disorderly, right? But again, it only becomes a disorder if you go into a society that says you have to control your stuff and sit down and be a worker for 8 hours. It's, that wasn't a disorder when we were hunter-gatherers, for example. When we were hunter-gatherers, it was an advantage to have the quick brain thinking of somebody with ADHD, like the persons who are gathering, to be able to quickly get the berries and see, like, okay, that's not a good one, because ADHD, like, we see patterns, we see things really fast, we think fast. The best hunters had ADHD because they're like looking for the hunt. Like, we get ADHD people, we get motivated by, ooh, I'm gonna figure this out. And it really has seemed to be that in society, there is always a need for that. But when our society tells us that you have to stay still, you have to do this in this way, like education, the way it does it, anybody who doesn't fit that little mold is going to be called disordered.
Interesting. So your work as a speaker and a workshop facilitator centered around stress.
Yes.
So I feel like it would be apropos to get your definition of what is stress, what is anxiety, how would you define stress, how would you define anxiety?
Yeah, sure.
What's the difference between the two and how are they related?
Oh, such a good question. Because I didn't know the answer to that until I started studying the stuff and then working with it. So anxiety is an emotion, and stress is a biological process. So let me explain what I mean. There is a biological process called the stress cycle that all animals, all organisms have inherent to survival. So we're talking hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And what's required is basically for animals and organisms, remember we're talking about the reticular activation system, like the ability to sense things that have been, that you've now planted in your head as important, right? So then you start noticing things, like the Honda Civic, because you said you wanted to buy a Honda Civic. So what happens is organisms and animals, we get hardwired for paying attention to things that could be dangerous. So it could be like a large sound. It could be the smell of gas. It could be, feeling heat and something's burning. All the different sensory things, that would be a trigger. So that's the first thing that happens is, like, if you're just totally calm and then there is a environmental trigger, what happens is you secrete cortisol, adrenaline, and then glucose. And then you go into fight, flight, freeze. And then once the threat is over, you go to safety by releasing all the cortisol. So this is the stress cycle. But the emotions are kind of an outcome. They occur within the stress cycle, right? So fear is the main emotion we have that will create stress. Anger also, anxiety also. Annoyance will cause us, if somebody cuts us off, even if we're not mad and we're annoyed, that just created a trigger that creates the cortisol, And so what's useful to know about anxiety is that it's really, it's a close relative of fear, but I like to think of it in this way. So fear is like the emotion that something's about to happen right now that is dangerous. Anxiety is like you're anticipating something that could be dangerous in the future, and so you're trying to figure out a way to solve for it. And I'll give you a very practical example from my own life. It is, I get into the car and I notice the check tire pressure light is on, right? That's a signal that we're going to call anxiety, because it's not a danger, but it's like, oh, it's the car is telling me there could be some if you don't check this, something could go bad later, right? And so then you could go then change the air pressure, whatever, get the tire fixed, and the light goes away, and it's like, okay, the car's happy again. But that would be like anxiety. Fear is, I'm driving on the highway. This literally happened to me in Southern California with a lot of traffic, and the tire blows out, and I start to spin. This is now a death threat, and that is fear and adrenaline, and Thankfully, I didn't get hit, and I survived it. But that's what I like to think of the difference between anxiety and fear. The problem is that in our modern society, again, because we don't manage our emotions super well, we don't really talk about our emotions to understand what the triggers are, we often confuse anxiety with fear. So the anxiety becomes like, oh my God, I literally just got hit by a car and I'm about to die. But it's not true. It's still the future.
So fear and anger, in the moment emotions, in the moment feeling, and anxiety is you're predicting something.
Right. I mean, you're still feeling anxiety right now, but it's driven by different things.
Driven by the future outcome.
By the future outcome. Whereas fear is like, oh my God, I just saw a spider.
Yes.
Right? Or somebody cut me off. Right? And and the thing is that, and here's what I want people to get, because people always think like, I'm not mad, and I'm like, okay, but there's anger, and then the lighter version of that is frustration, and then the lighter version of that is annoyed, and then the lighter version of that is perturbed. They're all this, there's like, it might not be like the huge trigger, but if you're finding yourself annoyed all the time, you are being triggered all the time. Like that is the emotion that you are feeling that starts to generate that cortisol. And so people who are annoyed all the time are constantly stressed. It's just lower grade, but it's building up. And then if they don't interrupt that, then the next time something big happens, it's going to break the camel's back.
So anxiety is a symptom of fear. I mean, a symptom of stress.
It's the thing that will drive the stress. It's sort of like there's always a trigger, let's say, and we're going to have an automatic response to the trigger depending on what we have learned, right? So I mentioned some of those things like, you smell you smell something burning, or you smell gas, or you hear a loud sound that could be a gunshot, whatever, right? So there's a lot of those. But there's also things that as human beings in our society have become triggers because we are scared of getting kicked out of the pack because we're mammals, right? So the kinds of things that will trigger us that aren't death threats but could be death threats, so it's like this is now an anxiety kind of trigger, is going to be, I just looked at my calendar and I have a meeting in 3 minutes, and that is going to and if I haven't prepared, or if I'm running late, like so the issue is that I saw the calendar entry and that's a trigger. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So instead of I heard a shotgun, I saw the calendar entry and my brain was like, oh my God, I'm late. And that is going to trigger an emotion, and that is going to trigger cortisol. So to go back to we're driving, when I'm feeling good, like when I'm like calm, in general, I don't get mad at drivers. It's like, I lived in Southern California, trust me, the North Carolina drivers are nothing. I've also driven in London, left-handed with a stick shift. So I'm good with driving. I don't get that upset. But I can tell when my cortisol is starting to build up if when I'm driving, I feel annoyed. Because now, what doesn't normally annoy me, it's now building up, and I'm like, this person, and I can tell. Or I get anxious, or because I'm late, right? Say I'm late. The emotion can be, like if I notice the time, it could be anxiety. It could be panic. It could be anger at all these idiots driving in front of me. Like, it just depends on what narrative you're telling yourself about noticing you're late. And whatever narrative you're telling yourself, you're going to have an emotion. So the emotion could be fear. The emotion could be anxiety. The emotion could be anger or frustration. The emotion could be shame. Oh my God, I feel so stupid. Why am I late? So that's sort of the difference. Like the stress cycle, stress is the cycle, and stress is when you're having that fight, flight, freeze moment and you have all this cortisol and adrenaline. That's what stress is. And then the emotions are the things that come up in the moment of the trigger, depending on how we perceive the trigger, the threat. Make sense?
Yeah. They're like, it's all revolving around each other. That, I don't know, that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, but it's one of those things, like, for example, there could be I'm trying to think of a good trigger that could get everybody. Let's say you're at work and everybody's there and the fire alarm rings. So that's the trigger. Everyone will probably start into a stress cycle. But the emotion that people feel will depend on what they're thinking. So there's going to be somebody who's going to be annoyed, who's like, dang it, not another one, I'm trying to finish this thing. There could be another one who's like freaked out because they're like, oh my God, what if there's a fire? There could be another one who's happy. He's like, oh good, I get to get out of this awful meeting. But do you see how that same trigger elicits different emotional responses in the person depending on what they're thinking? Now, the person who's glad to get out of the meeting is not going to be in a stress cycle because they're happy. But the other two, they're now triggering cortisol and adrenaline, and they're going into fight, flight, freeze.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, is it possible for somebody to suffer from anxiety and not know it?
Yeah. So, yeah, and I think that's such a good question because, anxiety is both an emotion and it's now also a diagnosis condition.
Yeah.
So what I like to say is more, I'm feeling anxious in the moment is different than I have anxiety.
Because you said anxiety is an emotion, and emotions are fleeting. So
correct.
So when you're saying I'm anxious, that's the present. Right
exactly.
Now,
anxious. Right now I am anxious. Right.
But if you say I have anxiety,
now it's a diagnosis.
Now it's a diagnosis.
Right. It's like saying I have happiness.
Good example.
Right? I have anger. So when you have it, now it's like a fixed state. When you just say I'm feeling it, it's what you're feeling right now.
Got it.
Right? It's, think about temperature. If it's 100 degrees, I don't have heat. I feel hot.
Excellent.
But the thing is, here's where emotional states become mental illness if they just keep going and they get too and they keep happening, and then it starts to spiral. And then it becomes, now you've been diagnosed with anxiety. Now you've been diagnosed with trauma because a lot of things happened and you didn't get to complete the stress cycle in a safe way, so it stayed.
So I'm sure through your work, you understand that probably, would you say more than half of I can't say that. Would you say that the majority of people suffer from having anxious days or stress days?
I think that, I'll just limit it to, the U.S. because I can't speak for other countries.
That's why I hesitated on the question.
Yeah. I will say, so here's the thing. There's always stress. Stress is not the problem. It's stress accumulation that's the problem, right? Because remember that you get the trigger, you get the cortisol and adrenaline and the glucose. You go into fight, flight, freeze. And then what's supposed to happen is once you've reached safety, you're supposed to shake out the cortisol or cry it out or release it. And then you get back to safety. Okay. So that's the 4-step stress cycle, trigger, release the hormones, fight, flight, freeze to escape the threat. And then all animals are designed to do this multiple times a day, all the time. All of us. because we're always going to be triggered by unknown things or things that don't go the way we want. And not just humans, the animals. Like I have deer in my backyard. I can watch them and they're triggered all the time. Like somebody walks by and they're like, and then they're like, oh, okay, let me go back and eat. But you know what I'm saying? And so it's happening all the time. If you look at your pets, unless they have like a really safe environment with no stimulus, your pets are also going to be anxious at different times. I mean, like when the Amazon truck comes to deliver something up the driveway, the cats are going to flee and the dogs are going to go into fight mode and start barking in general, unless you have a really placid dog. So the key thing is that we all have stress, but the problem is that we're not releasing it as we go. So it accumulates. So then you're getting to the point where you're constantly annoyed. You're constantly frustrated, or you're constantly anxious, or maybe you end up having anger issues. I think that's a bigger thing for men, the anger issues, as a way for the suppressed emotions and cortisol to be shown, where it shows up as anger because anger is socially accepted among men.
So since it is hard for us humans to get a grasp over our stress and anxious days, how do you suggest that we normalize stress and anxiety and not having it all together?
Well, see, I don't want to normalize that I don't want to say that not having it all together is great. I want to say that...
I mean, we always are comparing ourselves to other people.
Right. No, and I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, the first thing is don't compare yourself to other people, because you're comparing your inside to other people's outsides and you don't know what a mess they're in on the inside.
I 100% agree with that. I 100%.
Right. But that doesn't help you get through it. That just helps you hopefully to start unshaming it. Mm-hmm. But the key thing is, the way we need to do this in our society is we have to give up on the old Aristotelian idea of, rationality and emotion, because the body is always keeping the score. And the more we try to just use our brains to suppress the emotion, the worse it gets. And what we animals are designed to do, particularly mammals, is that we're supposed to reconnect with our safe pack. That's how when the deer gets freaked out and the threat goes away, they go back to their pack. And then, one of the deer will come up. I like to say this because this is what literally happens in my backyard. The deer comes up to the other deer and goes like, "Oh my God, that was scary." And then the other one, if it was a human, it would be like, "Oh, you're stupid. What are you scared about? It was nothing." But deer don't do that. They don't shame vulnerability. They're just like, "Oh my God, you're right." And then maybe they lick them on the head and they're like, "Oh, how do you feel? Better? Okay, let's go eat Susie's hydrangeas." This is what they do. And, it could take them like a minute to reset their stress because they're not afraid of being vulnerable with the safe pack. That is going to be the key. It's not just like, well, everybody feels like crap, so it's okay that I do too. It's like, well, everybody feels like crap because we're also scared of being vulnerable to our safe packs. And I'm not saying go tell everybody your emotions, but you got to find the people who you trust, and one at a time you start building that pack. That you can actually talk about, I'm really overwhelmed by work. I'm really scared of what's going to happen, if something happens, or I'm really frustrated because my insurance company isn't helping. Just a lot of times people will say, especially people who have really suppressed, and men in particular, they'll be like, well, what's the point of saying it? It's not going to change anything. Au contraire. It changes everything. There is science behind this. That when you name the actual emotion, so instead of being like, those jerks aren't approving my blah, 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 there's science that proves that saying, I'm frustrated and angry and feeling disempowered because those jerks aren't approving my thing, it changes. You drop the cortisol. So there's actually a study out of University of Chicago where they did an exam. They did a study on performance in the math finals, math exam. And so they had 3 groups. So one group did nothing. They just went in and took the test. Group 2, they were told to write down what they thought they might be on the test. Group 3 was to write down how they were feeling about the test, like if they were feeling anxious or scared or anything. So they all did that. Guess which one outperformed the others?
3?
Yes, the ones that all they did was say how they felt, their anxiety, outperformed the ones that were talking about the test, that were staying in their head. And then you had the other ones that didn't write anything as just, a control group as well. But so here's the thing. We love talking about, oh, I think I might have this, and well, I have panic disorder, and this is not to negate panic disorder. It's a really serious thing. But I feel like so much of, because I used to be the same way. I was literally felt like I was a stick walking around with the brain on top. So I would sit there and psychoanalyze myself, analyze like, well, I must have, attachment disorder, or I have this, or I have that. We do that so much to try to understand why we don't handle our emotions. But doing that is bypassing what the body wants, which is just to name the dang emotion. Because when you name it, you tame it. That is the key. So that would be like one of the things that when I work as a coach one-on-one, like my clients learn to like be like those deer and be like, oof, oh my God, I was triggered. That scared me. Okay, now what do I want to do? And it's like you get better and better when you practice that. But it does require unshaming being vulnerable. And it does require finding safe packs.
Wow. So what I got from you is, embrace vulnerability and say the hard things out loud.
Yeah. And they're only hard because we've been shamed to see them as weak.
And I was going to say that is the problem.
Yes, that's the problem.
That's the problem, because nobody wants to feel shame. Nobody wants to feel less than somebody else. And that's what's holding people back from actually receiving great help or progress with their emotions.
Right.
Because they don't want to seem less than in front of their pack or in front of their coworkers,
exactly,
colleagues, or friends. So they're just going to bottle it up.
Yeah.
And deal with it behind closed doors if they do. But
and most of them don't. So I've been reading, my husband and I were reading a book by Peter Attia, who is pretty well known in terms of doing stuff on longevity and health, right? So he has this like New York Times bestseller that he wrote. I think it came out in 2023, and I'm blanking out on the name of the book. I apologize. But one of the things is, so he has chapters on all these different things that have to do with longevity. The last chapter is on mental health. And in that chapter, he talked about how he was so driven. He was like doing workouts, and he just was like, I have to be the best. And so he's an incredibly successful doctor, writer, thought leader. He has a great podcast called Drive. But in that last chapter, he was talking about how he kept losing, like he started to show more and more anger, right? Like the anger was coming out. And he was totally distanced from his wife and his kids. He talked about how like he was once in New York, his family was in California, and his 1-month-old son almost died because he couldn't breathe, and his wife and nanny saved him. And his wife takes the baby to the hospital and says, oh my God, this happened to the baby and it's gonna have to stay in the hospital. He said, call me when you get to the hospital and I'll talk to the ICU. He did not go home for 2 weeks. Because he was so disconnected. He was so disconnected. And he talked about like how men do that. How we, like a lot of time men do that. Like if you've had like a very traumatic experience in childhood, I mean, it could be like shock trauma, like sexual abuse, or it could just be like a parent, like a father who's emotionally abusive to you, or who tells you like, stop being a crybaby, you're not a man. A lot of boys get that. when that happens, that creates a trauma because boys are actually born more sensitive than girls. And so from the time that they start getting told that until they hit age 13 or whatever, and they finally get testosterone, and remember that testosterone is what helps you suppress emotions better, they're in pain. I mean, at least women, girls, we're allowed to cry and people will just be like, well, she's just a girl. But boys, I mean, and so what he's talking about in that is that, you know, if we want to help ourselves and live better lives, like there's so much, you know, he like underneath his rage was depression, and underneath that was trauma, and he figured it out and he's still working through it. But I feel like he, you know, that was one of the things, is like he didn't know how to be vulnerable because he couldn't be given everything he went through. And that had driven his perfectionism. That had made him a type A person. That has made him incredibly successful. So I applaud Peter Attia for sharing that kind of vulnerability, because that's what we need. We need more men to say, and women, but really men, because men are the ones that, like, it breaks my heart how hard things are for men because they're told that they shouldn't be emotional, you know?
Absolutely. And just to piggyback off of what you just said about Peter, you talked about how he was a perfectionist.
He still is, and he's still working on it, he said.
Perfectionist, type A, you know, very driven.
Yeah.
And that brings up the topic of, to me, good stress versus bad stress. So I always used to use I still use it to this day, but when I say good stress, I think of it like as purpose-driven stress.
Yeah.
And then bad stress, I kind of take it as like chronic stress. Do you believe that there's a difference between good stress or bad stress, or do you think all stress is the same?
That's a great question.
Because, I mean, if you're going to go... Well, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, tell me, please.
If you're going to try to achieve something worthwhile in life, it's going to be stressful. Anything worth having doesn't come easy. So,
Right.
like, when I think of purpose-driven stress, it's just like, this is purposeful to me. It's not going to be a cakewalk. There's going to be stress. Versus, you know, chronic stress, you're just stressing about everything in sight.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's a snowstorm tomorrow. It's going to be 12 inches of snow. We're going to be snowed in. Like, that is different in my eyes.
Yeah.
But you're the professional. Is there a difference?
So I'm going to present it in a different way, going back to what we talked about, the stress cycle. So stress is stress. If you get triggered, you know, some people are more easily triggered by things that some people may not be. But the trigger and the stress response is not the problem. Good stress is any stress that wakes you up to pay attention. Bad stress is any stress that you accumulate and don't release after you're safe. So the person that is purpose-driven, Peter Attia, very purpose-driven. He wasn't letting go of the stress. He was cortisol-driven. He was driven out of fear, out of a desire to control his, you know, because he felt out of control as a young child, right? So it's not about purpose versus, oh, you're stressed out about the snow. It's about, are you being driven by cortisol, or are you being driven and then keeping it on and just being driven by it, or are you being driven by dopamine? And so to go back to our dear friends, they might get triggered. Like, their purpose is, I'm going to eat plants. They're very purpose driven, right? But when they get triggered because they hear me come out of the back, you know, out of the door to put something in the trash, and they're like, you know, that's a trigger. They have the cortisol. Now, humans have this ability to not let go of the cortisol and still keep trying to do the thing. That's the thing, right? For the animals, they're just going to be like, ooh, that was stressful. Shake it off. Okay, keep eating. So that's the difference between good stress and bad stress. The good stress is you notice it, you bring yourself to safety and then you keep going, but you're not driven by cortisol. The bad stress is when you stay fight, flight, freeze. And there are people who stay there. I mean, I honestly, like most of my life, I was cortisol driven and I was very successful. I have a PhD from Brown. I had a tenure track job. But that was cortisol driven. What I'm doing now is not cortisol driven.
So you got to be in touch with your emotions.
Yes, sir.
Interesting. I mean, but to be fair, does cortisol-driven stress, it has its moments in your life, like if it's necessary?
If it's yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't know. You're late on the flight and you're running. You need that to get there. But I mean, cortisol is not meant to be used all the time. It's meant for those emergencies, those bursts. Like we're meant to be like, oh, there's a trigger and a stress. Get the cortisol and the glucose up. Okay, I escaped. Whew. Okay. But what happens is we humans don't bring it down because we've become so numb, and it's not our fault. It's just our societal upbringing that emotions are bad. I mean, we learned so early how to numb emotions, and we see that as strength. But but it's one of those things where when we can notice that, I mean, have you ever been awake in the middle of the night, stressed out, not able to sleep?
Yeah.
So no tiger about to eat you.
Yeah, no. That's where fight or flight comes from. Yeah.
Right. No, but it's still but you're still in fight energy. That's fight energy.
Yeah.
Except we're staying still. So that would be unhealthy stress. Now, if you're awake in the middle of the night because your father had an accident and he's in the hospital and you need to go be with him, that's healthy stress because you're responding to a real emergency. So
when you're staying in cortisol stress, that's like consistent bad things are happening to you in your life, or like?
No, not necessarily. It's just that we got trained to. So you probably have you heard of like metabolic disorders, like what those are? Like things like heart attacks, diabetes, thyroid issues, Hashimoto's, all those kinds of things. I'm sure you may or may not have heard this, but those are all driven by high inflammation, which comes from cortisol. That is a reason, and part of what happens is, remember, you also have glucose. So if you're constantly stressed out, you're just constantly swimming in cortisol and in glucose, right? So our bodies historically were not designed, like, we're talking hundreds of millions of years of evolution, to just sit there in the cortisol and in the glucose. That's why we have more mental health and emotional health and physical health issues. So the key is that if we can so this is one of those things that's really interesting. I think a lot of people think men are always like, toxic masculinity. I'm like, that didn't really start happening, like I said, till the late 19th century. Men used to be seen as sensitive. There's been lots of different things. Even the people who read the Stoic stuff, it's like Marcus Aurelius was not saying suppress your emotions. He was talking about think about what's going on and process it. Not much different than what I'm saying. But a lot of people have misplaced that and are now trying to use it to promote suppression of emotion. So going back to what we were talking about, the key is that we want to understand and get better and get more connected to what's happening in our bodies, because we have all, going back to your original question, we have all been taught that emotions are a problem. Some people less than others. I mean, like if you had really great caretakers who were emotionally intelligent and emotional adults, and they would see you and they co-regulated you. Like my husband had great parents. Like he would make mistakes. He has ADHD too, but he would just like it's like if his dad told him not to do something, he'd be like, I want to do that thing. And so when I grew up, my grandmother would whack the hell out of me. Even when I wasn't doing something deliberately wrong, I would just be sitting there reading a book, and then the next thing I know, she'd be hitting me because I was so absorbed in the book that I didn't hear what she was saying, and that she had been calling me ADHD. See, all these like things that I started to realize were ADHD now that I know what it is. And so that created this pain, and then my grandmother was not going to soothe it, right? Because she was hard on me. She wasn't going to be like, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Oh, here, it'll be okay. Let me, I love you, blah, blah, blah." She wouldn't do that. So all that cortisol kept staying, and I was called a crybaby and all that kind of stuff. So I knew that emotions were a problem, that I had to try to suppress them, that people were going to think I'm weak. My husband, he had great parenting. When he would make mistakes, his parents would, his dad would take him, and I'd be like, "Hey, remember I told you not to do that? You did that. And so what happened when you did that? Oh, that broke." And it's like, "Okay, so what are you going to do to fix it?" Like, that's all they would do. They weren't like hitting them and yelling at them and telling them they're stupid. They were looking at the action. And then if Bill was upset, they wouldn't shame him and be like, don't be a crybaby. They would just be like, "Yeah, it's upsetting. I get it." And then he'd get it passed, and then they'd be like, "Okay, let's go eat some hydrangeas." To go back to the deer.
Curious, I assumed if your grandma was treating you like that, she was probably treated like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
like, it's an intergenerational trauma.
So since we're on the personal route, I just wanted to, again.
I'll answer any questions, and I mean, I'm an open book.
Okay, great. That's great. I'm sure there's a multitude of things that cause stress, but some heavy hitters that come to mind is, feeling of unworthiness, feeling stuck, imposter syndrome, and just not happy. So please, if you care to share it with as much detail as possible, talk about how you managed or dealt with these emotions.
Sure.
How did you turn all these emotions around? And most importantly, how did you learn to not have happiness be your life journey? I mean, your life goal, but happiness is a part of your life.
So I will say that I'm going to ask you to repeat the question one more time. That it's more to like, how did I manage? Like, you were talking about more like the kinds of things that cause stress for people. Like, how did I was able to work through them, right?
Yeah, how were you able to work through them and turn them around?
Yeah, sure. So in my case, and I think in a lot of other people's cases, those things that you mentioned, like feeling like an imposter, feeling like you're not good enough, that all ties back to the early childhood stuff of being. Of learning at a young age that your emotions are not valid, that how you're feeling and how you're expressing your feelings is not valid. There's a lot of science about that. There's psychology that shows that, and not just psychology, like polyvagal theory is one of the things that talks about sort of like evolutionary biology of how we are designed as mammals and then as humans, and so what happens is, like, if you look at the deer, I love the deer, so I'm just going to keep using them as a metaphor. When they are born, they can flee and they can freeze. They could fight, but they won't be very good at it. But they could fight too, like they could. When humans are born, we can only freeze. Okay, we don't have the capacity to fight or to flee because we come out as infants, and there's this whole like interesting evolutionary stuff on why that is. But I mean, I geek out on this, so I'm going to just tell you is that we got so developed with our brains that we have to be born before our whole body is ready, and it would kill the woman if what it takes for the baby to be born with this massive head that we now have in order, as Homo sapiens, it means that we have to be born before we could do all the stuff that the other mammals could do, like fight or flee. Okay? Does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. So, what happens is when we are babies, and really all the way to about age 6 or 7, we don't know how to regulate our own emotions. What that means is, you know, say you have a diaper or something's, you know, your diaper's chafing you, or you're hungry or whatever, all you're going to do is cry because you can't get up and change your own diaper, you know? But what happens is if the parent comes or the caretaker comes and doesn't, if all the caretaker does is change the diaper but doesn't soothe the child, it doesn't get rid of the cortisol. Because touch actually generates something else. It generates this chemical called oxytocin. It's the connection and calm chemical. But oxytocin is super important because it is a cortisol buster. Like when oxytocin appears, it basically eliminates, like it causes the cortisol to disappear. So it's not just that you have cortisol dropping and then oxytocin is making you feel better. It's like you have cortisol dropping because you're crying, oxytocin goes up and it's like, whoosh, right? Which is why, like, you know, all these studies, like, I don't know if you ever heard there was a study on like the Russian orphanages where those kids, all they got was basic stuff, but they got no, you know, they got no nurturing. They were not, if somebody was crying and they needed a diaper change, they got a diaper, but they were not soothed. They had so many emotional problems, those poor kids. And so what happens is that, and then as we grow, again, it's not till about 6 or 7 that we are able to regulate ourselves. But we have to be taught by our caretakers. So if you know, let's just say, you know, I've worked with so many high achievers as a coach who had all this anxiety and stress. And so much of it, it's like, it's not like they all had trauma like that most of us think about. I mean, some of the trauma is things like ignoring them, not paying attention to them, so that they never learned how to soothe themselves because nobody taught them. Their caretaker didn't teach them. And so what happens is, like, when you're a child, an infant, the most imperative thing is, like, if you are feeling this emotional pain caused by all this cortisol because there's some kind of discomfort, because cortisol is uncomfortable, right? And the parent is ignoring you, or the parent is yelling at you, or the parent is being a helicopter, like, oh my God, the baby's crying. All of those things will cause the baby to freeze because they're not getting witnessed in their fear. Because now the parent is the one that's scared, the parent is the one that's mad, and the baby will go into freeze. And that's where the beginnings of trauma occurred. So, and I think the thing is that what I really believe is that we all have some version of that. Because, you know, again, you know, in the 19th century, before that, we used to live in more communities and people took care of each other, right? And then once you start saying America is about having your own house and being a single unit, that's some hard work to raise families and kids. Parents are stressed. And now they're being told, you have to be able to do it alone, when for, you know, hundreds of millions of years, we were doing it in packs. And I do think that is part of what the generational trauma is. It's not just the trauma of, say, abuse or, you know, those kinds of things. It is the trauma of being told you have to be able to handle it yourself, and you're a parent, and then you're passing that on to your kid because you can't take care of your emotions because you're so stressed out, and you can't take care of theirs. And so we're all kind of doing that. And so what I believe is that I think unless you got lucky like my husband did, who had like really great parents who co-regulated him, at some point as adults, we're going to have to do that work ourselves. And the and that's what happened with me. Like I hit a certain point, I'm like, oh, there's this thing that's wrong. And it's not what I thought. It's not that I'm broken. It's that there's some emotional dysregulation based on my on the past. And so then I had to learn about it. But the good news is that we are hardwired for connection. We are hardwired for vulnerability. And when we can, as adults, if we could learn that sooner and heal whatever that wound was from childhood, that's how we end generational trauma. And Peter Attia talks about that too. I mean, I'm totally on the same page as he is. That all of us has a certain amount of trauma, but when we heal it, we now end the line.
So the trauma that we're dealing with is not really a household by household trauma. It's a nation trauma.
Yeah, it's a societal trauma.
It's a societal trauma.
Right, because even like with my husband, he has great parents, but but he still then had to go to school. I mean, we were just talking about this today. He played football in high school. He hated it. But he could not quit because he knew they were going to call him a wimp. So this is societal pressure. And then he was like, oh, lucky for me, I got injured doing something, and so I had to quit the team. And so he had an out. But think about that. Like that. So, at a certain point, we start going out into society, and now we're getting what everybody else says. And then you start like, ooh, I have to be this kind of man. Otherwise, I'm going to get beat up, or I'm going to be shamed, or I'm going to get in trouble.
And I like how you said we're hardwired for vulnerability. Mm-hmm. But society influences us not to be vulnerable.
Exactly.
So you have that push and pull within all of us.
All of us, exactly. Sometimes I use like the metaphor of a computer that I say, like the operating says we have this stress cycle, and the way we complete stress is by being vulnerable with our pack. And that reduces the cortisol, we get oxytocin, we feel better, we get back to it. Like that's the design. And then on top of the operating system is this stupid program that says emotions are weak. So we get stuck here. There's no way. We can't express emotions. We can't be vulnerable. We can't tell other people because society says you're weak. And so then we stay stressed. And the thing is, like I said before, the body keeps the score. The body keeps the score, and you may like, even if you're able to suppress it a lot, like I think this is the thing that's super interesting. Some people don't cry a lot. I happen to be a crier, and I think I'm an HSP, a highly sensitive person, like just naturally. In every species that has survived, there always has to be about 15 to 30% of the population that's an HSP because we play some kind of role, which is cool. So any HSPs watching, yay us, we're doing something important. Don't let people think you're weak. But what I have found is like, some of the people I was working with, who are these really like, presidents and, chiefs of staff and things like that in organizations, they're really type A, trying to like really do all this stuff, but then their bodies kept the score. So one of them got lupus, one of them got Hashimoto's, and then thyroid cancer. So it happens. I mean, this is a thing that, and then for men, it doesn't tend to show up like that. It tends to be heart attacks. That's just my observation, right? But it's all that cortisol buildup. So the body is always keeping the score because the body is not designed to hold on to cortisol. The body is designed kind of like if you drink a gallon of water, you're going to pee it out. We are designed to like, hey, you have that cortisol surge. Hey, I'm safe again. Better.
So talk about your personal journey. Is your personal journey just your grandmother's interaction, or was there more to it?
Oh, there's a lot to it, but I'll give you the short version. So this is a trigger warning for our audience. is that when I was, so I'm going to show you this picture. I don't know if you can see it. Should I just show it like this?
Yeah, you can post.
Okay. So this is me and my family. This is one of those photos that we got taken when at church. So it was part of the church bulletin or whatever. So I'm the little white girl there. And that's my mom. This is the only picture I have with my mother, my brother, my sister, my grandmother, and my 2 cousins. So I stand out, right? I'm pretty white.
Yes.
So this was always a comment about how I looked so white and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah when I was a kid. And that kind of began to make me feel like I didn't fit in, right? And also my grandmother always said that my mom, so my mom died before, like a month before my 2nd birthday, right? And so then my grandmother had to raise all of us when she died, so she had a lot of stress, and she also had her own trauma and had a lot of anger and didn't know how to handle it, you know. But the thing is that I then found out when I was 13 that the reason I look white is that my mom had been raped by her landlord. And so I was the result. So that was pretty traumatizing too, because, and that I lived with that for years. I will say, I believe you know that I told this story in a video that won me an NSA competition for storytelling. And if you want to I'll give you the link if people want to see it, because it's like a 5-minute story, so it's fast, and it will tell you the story, and it's not depressing, it's actually empowering and funny in times. But what I say in that story that maybe will be helpful for people is that, you know, I felt so much rage when I learned that, right? And my grandmother had said that they told your mother she should have an abortion. The doctor did, because she had had a weak heart due to, I think she had rheumatic fever as a child. And so her heart was weak. So they're like, the baby's going to kill you. But then my mom said to them, no, the baby's innocent. So she chose to have me. And then what happened is she had a stroke when I was born, and then she had a fatal stroke a month before my 2nd birthday. So, yeah. And all of that, like when I learning that at 13 is a terrible time to learn anything, right? Like that's when we're all like questioning our identity and all that kind of stuff. And but I just felt rage, right? I just felt this rage, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so I tried to suppress it. I was always very much like trying to be like, no, I'm really Mexican. I'm really Mexican. Like I was so defensive about it. And it really wasn't then until I got diagnosed with complex PTSD, and then I started seeing my therapist, the one in the UK, that I was able to heal that. And then here's where we come full circle to everything I'm telling you. I had to name it to tame it. I had to name those emotions, because I think what was happening for me is like, I don't have anybody to say this to, and what's the point? It's not going to change anything, right? To say my rage, to say all that. And so for, you know, whatever 40 years, I could think was he shouldn't have done that. And I shouldn't be here. Because I couldn't reconcile, if I'm saying he shouldn't have done that, if he hadn't done that, then I wouldn't be here. And I'm here because he did that, so I shouldn't be here, right? It's like, so, you know, it's a weird logic, but that's what it felt like. So there was a lot of pain, and it really wasn't till I talked to my therapist and I finally talked about those things, not by just talking about it, but by naming it to tame it, by doing the emotional stuff, that I was able to say, I hate him. And I hate what he did. And because I'd never said that. I'm so angry that he did that. I just kept thinking he shouldn't have done that. And a lot of the time, as human beings, I would say that we stay stuck in our emotions because we should things. We say that they shouldn't do that. They should do this. Might be even like, I should be this way. And anytime we say a should, it creates another trigger with cortisol and adrenaline. And the fact is, a should, you can never escape it and resolve it because you're arguing with the reality. It's not that way. So it is one of the most insidious ways in which we are generating stress all the time. And it comes, again, because we're told we can't name the real emotion. So me not wanting to name my anger and my fury and all that meant my brain would say things like, he shouldn't have done that. And all that does is create more cortisol, right? And there's no way out because he did do it. And I share that story because I know that we do this all the time. And this is one of probably the biggest things I do in my coaching, is that anytime somebody is stuck and, and stressed, there's always a should. There's always a should. And I'm not saying don't should yourself, but start noticing when we're shooting ourselves. When we're saying, yeah, my mother-in-law shouldn't have said that. As opposed to, I wish she hadn't said that. I feel hurt that she said that. Then it drops. But when you're arguing with reality, somebody named Byron Katie always says, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. And so that I would say that's probably the biggest thing, is that what keeps us stuck is if we can't name the emotion, we stay in our heads and talk about how things should be, and then we get even more stressed. Where it's just easier to just be like, I'm pissed that he raped her. I wish he hadn't done it, but he did. And then notice how I sighed. I didn't even plan that. But when we do it, there's this thing called the physiological sigh, that you're releasing it. And it's just like hearing your stuff and getting out of the emotion by labeling it. It interrupts all the stress. So I mean, honestly, it's so simple. It's hard because we don't know how to do it and we need to practice, but it's a simple practice.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for being strong and sharing that story. I could tell, I mean, it's obvious that it hurts and it's terrible, but thank you so much for your willingness to open up and be vulnerable and share that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I do think that there's a difference between how I share it now versus how I would have shared it years ago, because I was still shooting and I would have been enraged and you would have been like, oh my God, that sounds awful, but I can't help you. That's when you share from the wound. But when you heal the wound, you can share from the scar and then help people with that so they see what's possible. And that's kind of what I liked about going back to Peter Attia's book, that he shared from the scar, not from the wound.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So first of all, I don't mean to, rip the scab off the scar, but...
Oh, it's off. I'm good. It's healed. It's like beautiful skin.
Okay. I just want to be respectful. Did you ever meet your father?
I did, because he was our landlord. But I didn't know that. He died when I was 7, and I didn't know the story until I was 13. So I had met him. I just didn't know. I don't remember what he looked like. In my head, he looks like Orville Redenbacher because he was older.
My goodness. Oh, wow. Very
I have no idea what he looks like, but that's in my head what he looks like, Orville Redenbacher.
Wow. So your mom sacrificed herself.
Yeah. Well, my mom loved me, and one of the things is that part of the reason I like to tell that story is because there's a lot of things we don't have control over. There's, all the things, the big political things that happen that we don't have control over. We can't control the weather. If there's a big hurricane that comes to North Carolina, for example, like it happened a year and a half ago, very devastating, fires in California. We can't control what other people say or do. And we can't control the fact that we are aging and will die and we will have sickness. We can't control that other people that we care or love will have illness and will die. All of those things are beyond our control. But when we can name the emotions around our grief about that, because there's always, grief is always what happens when something we had is gone or something we wished we had is gone. So for a long time, for example, I didn't know that I had to grieve my mom because I didn't know her. I'm like, oh, why would I feel bad? I was 2 before, but what happens is you can still grieve the thing that you lacked, that you knew coulda, shoulda, wished it was there, right? So that's just to say that we want to recognize that in the face of all those things that we don't have control of, if we go back to my mom's story and then to my story about it, there's a lot she couldn't control, but she had that one thing that she had control over. She had her choice. And when I was able to release all the pain and feel the emotions and again have a compassionate witness, which was my therapist. She was the deer that was licking my head, having that, and I was able to release that anger, I finally saw that I kept thinking she was a victim. I kept thinking I was here because of what he did. But what I realized is that she may have been victimized, but she wasn't a victim. Like, she made a choice, and I was here because she chose to have me. So that flipped a lot. And that's what I kind of learned, that it was like, man, even in the worst circumstance, think of what happened to my mom. She found her power by finding where she had choice, right? And that's the thing that I would want people to know, that has happened. That's been like a huge transformational thing for me to realize that, and that I help people with. It's like knowing where we don't have choices, grieving when we don't have choices, finding where we do have choices. That's where we find our power in the face of challenges. And ultimately we have to do it together. We're not meant to be here alone. We're pack animals. We're supposed to be vulnerable together and rise together. But that's what I learned from all that.
Nice. So how is happiness a part of your life and no longer your life's goal?
Happiness. It's so funny because I'm going to use a different word. I'm going to use joy. Is that okay?
Well, before you answer the question, what is the difference between happiness and joy? Why did you choose joy instead of happiness? There has to be a difference in definition.
I don't know if there's a difference in definition as much as the word happiness has a lot of baggage.
Baggage?
Uh-huh.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Explain. I was not expecting you to say that. Baggage.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Got it. Okay.
So and I think that's kind of indoctrinated, that it's like I have to pursue happiness.
It's not innate.
Yeah, like, and if you're pursuing happiness, you're never there. And I mean, I think if we could reclaim the word happiness, that would be lovely. But I like the idea more like contentment and joy and peace. Like, I guess those are all parts of happiness in a way. Mm-hmm. But but how I have done that is precisely through the things I was just sharing. That it's like, when I stopped shooting myself and the world, there was a huge release of tension and stress and a desire to be perfect, a desire to achieve this thing, that if I could just do things, then everything would be fine. And when I learned that, no, this is the way of life, trigger, response, safety, trigger, that it's like, oh, this is life. This is what we do. We're going to be triggered by things we have no control over. And again, it's not just us. This is mammals, all animals, because we don't know, like in the moment, we don't know if we're going to survive it. So we get triggered. But I would say that my happiness comes from having recognized all the things I don't have control over, and that all I have right now is right now. We will grow old, get ill, eventually die. And we have no control of that, and we try to obsess over that. Or we try to obsess over controlling somebody's behavior because then that'll make us feel good. Like, well, I would feel better if they would be this. Really recognizing that and letting go, and it's an ongoing practice. I mean, this is something we can learn, but it is a practice of recognizing when we have an expectation or a should that's causing us pain, and to be able to notice it and see that that's what's causing us the pain, and then choose to be grateful for what you have right now. So I would say that's it, because I even have a tattoo. Can I show it to you?
Sure.
Okay. So it says trade expectation for appreciation, because this was hard for me. I couldn't do it. I had to get a tattoo. But the whole quote is actually trade expectation for appreciation and the world transforms instantly. I couldn't fit it. It was too long. So, but as an example, when I first heard that quote, I was running along East Campus at Duke University in Durham. And I had been training I'd been doing like half marathons pretty regularly, but I was just having a bad run because I think I'd skipped, a couple of weeks of running after a race, and then I was getting back into it. Oh my God, this feels terrible. And I was just like, rah, 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 and like getting frustrated and annoyed. And then one of the things is that on East Campus, as you're running, they have this one road that will take you to West Campus, and there's all this wall space, and Duke students will cover it in murals.
Oh, so yeah.
You might have seen that. And they have them at other schools, like NC State has something like that. It's a fun thing, gives students a way to express their outlet. So I'm coming around the bend, and I see huge mural that says trade expectation for appreciation and the world transforms instantly. And I literally stopped when I looked at that. And it was a beautiful mural, like whoever did it was like super beautiful blues and trees and things. So I took out my phone and I took a picture of it. And I still have a picture. Kept going, but then I started really thinking about it. Oh, my expectation is that I should be as good as I was 2 months ago before the race. And that's a should. I should be feeling differently than I am. But guess what? My body's feeling the way it's feeling right now. I'm arguing with reality, and I'm losing 100% of the time. And so I flipped to appreciation, and I was like, well, what can I appreciate? What am I grateful for? Oh my God, I am grateful that I can go on a run. Not just because I'm fit enough to do this, but because I'm not somebody in poverty. So I came from poverty, so I always think about this, like how lucky I am that I'm middle class now. I'm not somebody who has to go from one job to another just to make ends meet and comes home exhausted. I have this privilege. I am so lucky that I could go in the middle of the day and take a run. I am lucky I live in Durham. Look at this beautiful place I could run. And it's like it shifted my whole mood, and my run went great. And so that's really the key to happiness, is that what makes us unhappy and stressed is when we should things and we have expectations of things. And if we could start noticing, start practicing and noticing that any, and the first thing is notice that you're even triggered. Notice, if you get annoyed in the car by somebody, what was your expectation? That there shouldn't be any other cars on the road?
No, yeah.
Right? And it's like, oh, what if I can, it's like, oh, well, of course there's cards on the road. But I appreciate that I have this car. I appreciate that I have the capacity to drive it wherever I'm going. I am lucky that I have this, that, and the other. Happiness.
So living in your present, enjoying your now, let tomorrow's worries be for tomorrow. Just embrace how you're feeling right now. Is that what I'm taking? Because for me, I can speak up from personal experience. You know, once I achieve a goal that I've been trying to achieve for weeks or months on end, the second I achieve it, I'm already worried about, I'm already stressing about the next goal.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
We all do that.
Purpose-driven, you know, but I don't sit down. It's hard for me to sit down and be like, you know what? This goal I have been trying to achieve for the past 2 weeks, and I say a little hooray for 1 second, and then the rest of the day, I'm stressing for the next goal. So
yes, you're cortisol driven, my friend, like everybody else.
I guess so.
You are. And the key thing is, so there's two things I want to say. So I'll explain this in a moment. But the first thing you asked about is, be present in the moment to what you're doing, right? Instead of worrying about the future. I'm not saying that you don't think about the future, but it's sort of like you want to go back and forth between thinking about the big picture and the small picture.
What I've learned is, actually from my last interview, is detach from the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Like you want to you have an intention, but you're not attached.
Yes.
You have a commitment, but you're not attached.
You're not attached.
Because that's the should, and that's the expectation, and then and then if you feel like it has to happen, that's what's driving your cortisol. Because exactly,
it's not going to happen on my time. If I'm going to put in the effort and the work for it to happen.
Correct.
But when it happens is not my doing. It's
correct.
Whenever it should happen.
Right. And it's not what should. I'm not even going to say.
Should.
Yeah. It's just like, because here's the thing. Remember all the things that we don't have control of? Like say so this is one of the things that drives me nuts. Like there's some coaches who will be like, well, set your money goal and then just go do it. And it's like, and then when you don't, then it can become very cortisol driven. Like, I have to set this money goal because I said I was going to make this much money. Now, what happens is that you don't have control over how many people are going to pay you money. You literally do not, if you're in your own business. You have control of, talking to people, letting them know what you sell, doing your marketing, doing your sales, doing a good job. You have control of that, but you have no control over whether somebody's going to say yes to you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely not. And if you think that that your goal is, I need to make this much money so I can feel successful or whatever, that's a cortisol driven goal. And guess what? You're going to come off as desperate because you're not trying to serve them. You're just like, I need you to help me make my goal. So the key is to make a goal that doesn't stress you out, but still motivates you. So and I think a lot of the time, like it can't be like a crazy goal. Like say if you made $10,000 last year, you're not going to make 100,000. Maybe you say, I'm going to double it. That's sort of reasonable. Maybe I can make 20,000 this year. Like if you're starting a business. But when you make a reasonable goal, you stop looking at the goal. You have to then decide what are the actions that I can take that are more likely to get me the goal. So it may be like for me, it's like, I'm going to follow up with people who have shown interest. I'm going to have, and let them know what I'm up to and see if they're interested. Like literally, and that's how, like for a lot of people, we don't want to sell. But that is going to be like in my case, anybody who works in sales, if you're not making calls, you're not going to make any money. So you got to know what is the one thing that if I really focused on doing that thing is going to get me closer to the goal. And you focus on that. You make the goal smaller. Like maybe it's going to, so instead of being like waking up every day, oh my God, I got to make 100,000 or whatever, you wake up going, oh yeah, I'm going to call 5 people. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing, that you become cortisol driven when you're so focused on the goal that you're just trying to get there.
Right.
Instead of being like, I have that goal, that's what I intend, that's my commitment. How can I get there? Like, and if you have a weight loss goal, you could set a goal. Like, I think a lot of the, like, some of the things could be like, maybe it's like you might not be able to reach that goal depending on your body composition, depending on what's going on. It might take longer. Like, or if you want to run a marathon, maybe you get injured, you get sick, work, so when people set this goal and then they're so attached, like, but I was going to do that thing on that day and I was going to do it like that, that's cortisol driven. You can't do that. You have to be able to be like, this is what I want to see happen. What would it take for me to get there? What are the small steps that if I do regularly are going to get me closer?
Absolutely. A quote that I've been abiding by recently is by Richard Petty.
Oh, yeah?
He says, put yourself in a position to win and allow the circumstances to dictate your outcome.
Yes, that's a wonderful quote.
So, yeah, like you said, wake up, make your 5 calls, detach from the outcome. If all 5 pick up, great. If all 5 pick up and only one person wants to buy in, great. If all 5 don't pick up, great. You did what you had to do.
Exactly. You're looking at your specific thing, but if you're like saying, but I have to make that money, you're putting your power in the hands of whether they say yes or no,
yes.
Whether they answer the phone or not.
Yes.
It's again knowing I have no control over that. Like, I have no control over whether somebody wants to assault my mother, but I have control over how I choose to then handle it, right? But it's like the same thing. So exactly, that's exactly it. But going to this, now I want to tell you why I give you the pom-pom. Okay. If you want to be dopamine driven and not cortisol driven, because dopamine is like, the brain is either going to use dopamine or it's going to use cortisol for fuel. It also uses glucose, but the glucose is really the fuel. But you could either be taking action based on fear or anxiety or the cortisol, or you could take action based on, oh, cool, I want to do that. So that's dopamine, right? And the key thing is that if you want to become dopamine driven, you have to celebrate all your tiny wins and pause. You have to pause and celebrate them.
Yes.
And that's science. Here's why. Because if you're so used to beating yourself up for not getting things done in time, and then you're like, oh, now I got to get to the next thing, you're still generating cortisol. You never pause. You never have the recovery time. And so BJ Fogg, who is a professor at Stanford, this is where I learned it from. He talks about whenever you do a behavior that is going to take you where you want to go, especially if it's hard, you have to celebrate, no matter how small. Now, in general, so he has this thing. It's an ABC is his acronym. So A, you have to find an anchor of that's something you just do like that you want to anchor the new behavior into. So let's say you need to do your 5 calls, right? Maybe the anchor behavior could be, well, you're always going to get on your computer. So as soon as you get on the computer, you go straight to your phone list. You don't even have to do a call. All you do is you go to your phone list, because you got to make the behavior smaller, so easy that it's easy to do. And what you do is then, so you have the anchor, which is, I got on my computer, the behavior, I pull up the first person's name. I don't have to call them. The C is celebrate. Yay, I went straight there. And then what'll happen is now you're more likely to actually call them. And then you start building and you start building. And over time, 5 calls will feel so easy that becomes your benchmark. It's like, well, I want to get 10, but let's just do 5. Like, then you're building capacity. But every time you celebrate, and you celebrate that you did not go scroll on Reddit. You know, hey, I actually went to the thing. I didn't look at my email. Yay me. Why is that important? Because brains like dopamine and it needs that reward. So anytime you complete something, if it's a small step that's leading you to a big goal, you have to celebrate it so that your brain's like, oh, it's kind of like the easy button. That was easy. Maybe I want to do it again. Instead of beating yourself up, because what we're constantly doing is beating ourselves up going like, oh, I'm behind. I should be getting this done faster. It's like, no. If it took you, twice as long to do it, you're like, yay me, I did it. Now what did I learn that I could apply next time? Okay, cool. All right. Maybe I didn't, I learned that this takes longer, so I'll give myself more time. Or, I learned that I have to do these other things and it'll be shorter. But you have to celebrate the win, even if it was messy, even if it took longer, even if any of that, because otherwise the brain does not learn that this is the behavior you want. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
So that's why I'm giving you that pom-pom, my friend, because I want you to put that by your, wherever your main area of work is.
Thank you, yes.
Yes, and put your body into it, because this is what, it's not just like, it's like if you put your body into it, you're like, yes, yay, me, I'm doing it, and you just say I'm doing it, because a lot of times people will say, well, I'm trying to make more calls. No, if you made one bloody call and nobody answered, I did it. I'm doing it already.
I did my part.
Yeah, I'm doing it. And you use the gerund. I'm doing it. Yay me. All right, now what? But so that pumps you up. Now you have dopamine. You're being driven not by the cortisol of the steak beating you, but by the dopamine of the carrot going, ooh, you want a carrot? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's the trick for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm learning and interviewing at the same time.
Excellent.
I almost want to take out a notepad and take some notes. This is great. Just two more questions that I have.
Sure.
I know on your website, your tagline or a tagline is you help people work with stress instead of against it.
Yes.
I don't know if you spoke about that directly, but I just wanted to ask the question directly to give you space to fill in the blanks, or if you did. Did you?
I sort of did, but I'll fill in the blank, which is basically, instead of telling you, I've told you what the stress cycle is.
The stress cycle, yeah.
I show you the simple techniques that work so you can complete the stress cycle and release the stress so it's not building up.
Okay.
It could be like you're standing, and a lot of it is going to be some of the things that I already talked about with you. It's like, if you're really stressed out, you need to be vulnerable with somebody who's safe. That is going to make you feel better faster. That's the fastest way. And it's the most complete way. Because, I know a lot of us, we exercise when we're stressed, and that's good. That's the equivalent of the dog who was in a fight going like, and then, so physical stuff is going to reduce stress for sure. But what happens if you're constantly stressed all day and you're not doing this, and it just builds up and you're like, I'm going to go work out at the end of the day. Now you're like totally exhausted. You may or may not do it. And all you did is get some of it off because you were holding it in so much. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, part of what I teach is that, you want to be a master at noticing when you're triggered, when you're feeling it, and learn and use this toolbox, because I give people a toolbox for all the different ways that they can do it. And the key thing is that it works better and faster than trying to hold it in. It's like cortisol is no different than urine. If you keep accumulating cortisol, it's going to want to come out. True. And you keep wanting to hold it in, that's when, men start doing really violent things and have unsuppressed anger. That's when some women might start crying because it's just like, man, it's so accumulated. And again, I'm not trying to gender it. It's just that because men have testosterone, they're less likely to cry and they're more likely to be like, ah. And since we have more estrogen and we have weird hormones, we're more likely to cry. But that's happening because we've been holding it in. So, if you wouldn't hold in your pee till the end of the day, why are you holding your stress in till the end of the day? It doesn't take that long. I can teach you how to reset it in the moment.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
How do we reset our stress?
A lot of people, we know a lot of those things already. But the first thing is you gotta be aware that it's happening. Like, can you tell when you're stressed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tell people is, like, a lot of time we can't tell because we're so used to it. You know, again, some people will say, let me just turn this off. There we go. Some people will, like, it's interesting because I kept running into this with some of my clients, and I finally realized what this was, is that they're like, no, I'm not mad, I'm just annoyed. I'm like, that is the same flavor, it's just milder.
Yeah.
That is a trigger. So one of the things is, the first thing is just noticing, start getting better at noticing. Like, so, like I said, like, for me, if I'm driving, I'm usually a very chill person, but if I start getting annoyed by traffic, I know I'm triggered. And then I pause and I'm like, I'm really annoyed. I'm feeling anxious. Why am I feeling, you know, I'm feeling anxious because of X. I'm feeling stressed because of Y. I'm feeling scared because of Z. I'll sit there and do it in the car. Just naming it releases it. And then I get, and that's the thing, that when you release the cortisol, see, when we have cortisol in our bodies, our brains can't think. Our prefrontal cortex shuts down.
Wow.
So you have to release the cortisol if you want to have expansive, creative thinking and be able to solve problems. So that's why, like, it's actually super simple, that when you learn, just like, here's how you reduce the cortisol, you're able to solve your own problems. And if you learn how to witness other people, you know, if you can be, you know, a safe person for somebody who wants to be vulnerable, where you don't try to fix them, you don't try to tell them what to do. All you do is like, yeah, it makes sense you feel that way. What else is going on? Yeah. How can I support you? Like, if all you do is that, that's going to drop the cortisol by a lot, because you just created psychological safety. You just said, hey, I'm safe with this person being vulnerable, and they heard me. My cortisol's now dropped. I have oxytocin because we were connected. And, oh yeah, now my brain came back online. Yeah, I'm actually okay. I think I know what I need to do. Thanks for listening.
It's funny you say brain comes back online. Goes to show a lot of us are operating on a day-to-day with our brain offline.
Our prefrontal cortex?
Because if the majority of the population is stressed with what's going on in the world, what's going on in jobs, in the household, relationships, and our brain is shut off, it's just like we're just
being reactive.
We're
being reactive.
And reactive people react to other people, and it's just
we
like
trigger everybody else. It's a chain. I mean, I will say, so you, like, in general, it's better to not have to keep using your prefrontal cortex. Like, in an ideal world, you use it when there's a challenge to figure out a problem, because it's actually an energy hog. So you know what it's like, you know, have you ever, like, if you're starting a new job or you're learning something new, you haven't been working out, but you are exhausted when you come home. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
So that's your prefrontal cortex trying to learn something new. And, you know, and so it's, you know, like, say if you have to drive a new way, you got a new job and now you're driving a different way, your brain has to be like, okay, wait, do I turn here? So you're using way more capacity. But once you know the route, it's habit. Like, you're not using your prefrontal cortex to drive at that point. Now, so just to be clear, that the fact that we don't use it isn't necessarily a problem. Like, it's by design. Like, if you're constantly using it to solve problems, you would die. Like our bodies are designed as animals to learn the habitual behaviors that will help us survive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the issue is, are the behaviors that we have made habit hurting us or helping us? Right. And so if we have a lot of stress all the time and we're constantly, like, cortisol driven, it's actually fine for the body, because the body's like, hey, I learned from a young age that I need to suppress my emotions and I need to be driven by cortisol. I'm not going to sit there and interrupt it. I'm being efficient. And it is efficient because when we're young, if we have parents, caretakers who tell us, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about, you better shut up or they're going to give you something to cry about. That actually saves your life. That thing, that pattern. It's just that once we're adults, that pattern is no longer useful. And that's why I say, like, at some point as adults, we figure out that we have these patterns that we needed for survival as kids that we're still running because they're habitual. But once you recognize that that's what's causing the burnout, the stress, the mental health issue, like all those things, then we can do that work of being like, how do we change that? How do we redirect the brain? And that's where celebration's important. Like, celebrate if you notice, ooh, I'm triggered, just go like, yay me, I just noticed. Seriously, like, it has to begin with that small, because right now your brain has been taught, oh, I got to suppress that emotion because that's a sign I'm weak. So now we want to be like, good job, brain. You noticed that I have cortisol. Now I can take a breath and now I can think. Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Susie, that's all the questions I have for today. Any lasting comments that you would like to leave the audience with about you, your brand, what's to come in the future, anything?
Sure. So I'm not sure when this will be coming out, but I was selected to give a TEDx talk in Charlotte on March 28th of 2026. And I'm really excited about it because it is going to be a TED Talk on the surprising truth about tears and stress. So when people watch this, if you're interested in watching that talk, hit me up and I will send you the YouTube link, or maybe we could add it later.
Yes, this should be out before March 28th.
Okay. So
and I will put all of your contact from your LinkedIn, your email, your website, all in the video.
Okay, sounds good.
In the video and in the description.
Oh, okay, sounds good. Yeah. And if for anybody who's listening, if any of this resonated and you think that I might be able to help either, your group, your organization, please reach out because I can help you and I would love to be of service.
Well, Susie, thank you so much for your time, for coming here, and your patience with rescheduling. I do appreciate it. And most importantly, as far as today is concerned, thank you for your vulnerability and explaining and going into detail as to why, we need to be cognizant about stress, anxiety, burnout, all of the above. All of those things bring us together in a very interesting way because we're all dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's an elephant in the room. In households, in corporate America, like we talked about.
Absolutely. In society, and the more we can name it and tame it and be vulnerable with our packs, the more we can go from just surviving to thriving. Yes. Name it and say it out loud. That's what I got from this. That's right. Name it and say it out loud, or write it down. It just can't stay in the head. And find your safe pack. I'm gonna put a plug here for those of you who are alumni or know this from NC State. This is a quote that they always say at NC State football games because they're the wolf pack. But it is critical to understanding what we do too, which is that the power of the pack is in the wolf. And the power of the wolf is in the pack. We can't do it alone. And so each wolf, when they do some of this work, you're impacting the pack. Yes. And then when the pack does it, we're impacting each wolf. Wow. I forgot the quote. I have a quote too, but I forgot it. I don't want to butcher it. But essentially, it's just, the person said, when we change ourselves, we change society. Just mankind, because when we change ourselves, how we interact with our new version of ourselves, how we interact with people is going to be absolutely yeah because we if we are regulated, we help put other people at ease, and then they help put other people at ease. But if we're triggered, you know what it's like. You walk in someplace and somebody, like, the energy is like, okay, you're going to get triggered. So when we could learn to regulate ourselves, and really together, not by yourself, go, again, find your pack and be vulnerable, the more we can go out and make a difference in the world.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Susie. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, let's do a little tom-tom. Yay, us!
Yeah! Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.